statements by honourable members, and I call the member for Mayo.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I was elected in 2016, and over the last 7 years I cannot recall a time when so many people in my community have contacted me to describe their hardship that they're experiencing. And what started as a trickle has become a flood of stories. And I heard a term recently called polycrisis, multiple crises that are culminating in leaving people in a state of despair. The centre of this crisis is the cost of living. It's contributing to people are suffering enormous pressure with respect to energy costs, rent, mortgage stress, grocery bills, insurance costs, school fees, council rates, the list goes on. This week I spoke about an aged couple in my community, an elderly couple. They're going to bed at 6 o'clock at night because they can't afford to put on the heaters. They're going to bed and putting on their electric blanket. And they're trying not to get up until it's at least warm because their electricity bill for a quarter is over $800. That is just not sustainable. And electricity costs, the energy costs are I think, the nub of our crises. That coupled with housing. Now, an organisation in my community, all of our shelter and food, emergency food organisations are really buckling under pressure. Hungry No More, run out of the Mount Barker Uniting Church, 6 months ago was feeding around 50 people. Now they're feeding around 70. They have 5 people sleeping around the church grounds, some in tents, some in their cars and some on couches. Now, the church would normally be able to find alternative accommodation, but there isn't any. And this is a fault that lays at successive federal governments and state governments. We're talking about that constant salami cutting of state government-owned housing right across our nation, and we're talking about the fact that we haven't had a housing policy. We had NRAS. NRAS is aged out, and we haven't for a decade have anything that has increased the stock. And it's impossible to understand how our nation, we are an energy powerhouse, and yet our people in our communities are put in this terrible situation. We should be the envy of the world, but instead I have day on day people writing to me who say they've never contacted a Member of Parliament about these issues before. We must do better. We must treat this with the urgency that it deserves. We must all work together, and state governments need to do their share as well. And I can't think of another time. There's a hopelessness. We all need to find the solutions, and we need to work together to do this. And so I would urge the government, make this your #1 priority, because fielding those calls is just heartbreaking. We must do more together, and so let's all come together to make this happen.